Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ENLIGHT Lecture Series. Today, we are broadcasting our final lecture inspired by the ENLIGHT flagship area, Culture and Creativity, and the focus today is on tourism and culture economy. Today will proceed as follows. Both our speakers will have 10 to 15 minutes to present their research. In the meantime, we'll gather your questions, which you are free to post in the chat if you're joining us on the Zoom webinar. And we'll put these questions together and address them during a joint discussion at the end of the session. This lecture is also followed by an online networking event in a separate Zoom meeting, and everyone who signed up for that has received the link by now, so you will be able to continue your discussion there as well. In today's lecture on tourism and culture economy, we will delve into the world of material humanities and explore material, visual, and textual cultures of science. So whether you are an expert in this field, a researcher, an educator, a student, or you're simply curious about culture, this lecture can offer some valuable perspectives and inspiring ideas. And it is my pleasure to welcome today two experts from ENLIGHT Universities who will share their research with us live. Let me introduce you to Margarete Vöhringer from the University of Göttingen, today joining us with a talk on material humanities, teaching interdisciplinary lessons with museum collections. Her presentation will be followed by a colleague from the Comenius University Bratislava, Lenka Vargová, who will present her research on interactive elements in water transport museums. So we can proceed with the first presentation for today with Margarete Vöhringer from the University of Göttingen, who studied art history and media theory, philosophy and aesthetics, as well as media art at the Karlsruhe University of Arts and Design. She was also a guest student in art history and media studies at Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin. From the 2011, she was the head of research area visual knowledge, but also simultaneously teaching assignments and substitute professorships in Berlin as well. And today she is joining the ENLIGHT Lecture Series with a talk on material humanities, teaching interdisciplinary lessons with museum collections. That kind of touches upon our last lecture, and it's a good transition into the final bit of culture and creativity and ENLIGHT. Thank you very much for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to present my research and teaching work at the University of Göttingen, where I am a professor for the materiality of knowledge and where I am building a new research and teaching surrounding called Material Humanities. And I'm going to present today how this is embedded in the collection and museum of the University of Göttingen. The university houses over 70 academic collections, for which it opened a new museum 2 years ago that shows the creation of knowledge and makes it available for public critical reflection. We are part of a network of university museums, the U4 network, with Groningen, Ghent, Tartu, and Uppsala, that is intended to enable cooperation on research and teaching with academic collections and its materials. Maybe we can expand the cooperation through the ENLIGHT network. The starting point for our initiatives in teaching and researching with material objects and collections is the following observations. In times of advancing digital transformation, knowledge of materials and haptic skills are gaining in importance again, and an increasing number of employers expect them from graduates of both the humanities and the natural sciences. At the same time, thinking with materials promises a deeper understanding of the material world and our position in it, no matter from which discipline young scholars start to think. The interdisciplinarity is already required by the objects we find in the depots of our university. Instruments, specimens, rocks, ethnographica, models, plaster casts, pictures, pieces of music, and films have been collected and studied by technicians, doctors, biologists, ethnographers, geologists, and historians. Some of them are less interesting, meanwhile others are persistently crucial. If we understand these objects as co-actors in the development of knowledge, we could also see the sciences in a new way, embed them in a cultural and material history, and comprehend the political interests connected to them. But it is not only the history of science that can be traced anew. We would also like to make the attempt to relate the historical collections to topics of our present. What does the telescope of the 17th century have to do with technology today? What can be learned from the relationship between science and art for our understanding of value? What do scientific materials tell us about climate change? What kind of reality do the mathematical models depict, especially in times of uncertainty as we experienced them in the last years? In order to reach students across all disciplines, also from the science faculties, and invite them to study materials in interdisciplinary cohorts, the Georg August University in Göttingen offers a new certificate program called Object Competencies for BA students and a major area of study for MA students called Material Humanities. It is characterized by linking object-based research with the scientific collections of the university and the theories of current material philosophy. Spread into 4 semesters, the curriculum gives the students an opportunity to develop questions based on concrete object and collection studies, discuss these questions with regard to their disciplinary cultures, and finally present their findings and conflicts in a small public exhibition at the Forum Wissen, our museum. The aim is to bridge the gap between the humanities and the natural sciences with regard to the material challenges of our time. That means especially to develop a more mindful and responsible treatment of the material world as well as of cultural as of natural origin. Let me give you some examples to object lessons we have already realized in Göttingen. In one seminar on prepared nature, we have worked on the use of preparations in the sciences and looked through the university collections for crucial examples. The question was what exactly scientists were doing with preparations, how they were produced by taxidermists, how that changed the relationship of nature and culture, and finally, how preparations were presented in our educational exhibit. What came out of the seminar was a rather diverse exhibition on prepared nature, what scientific objects hide, where the students try to show that sciences have less objective and rather specific and very different views of nature. In another seminar, we were looking at scientific instruments in the university collections, and the question was how these instruments, which were developed to change the view of the world, have an inverse effect on their users, on people. The seminar came during the pandemic and therefore realized an online exhibition with the title Computer Senses, How Magnetic Tapes, Binoculars, Computer Mice, and Punch Card Machines Change Our View of the Digital, where the students related the historical instruments from the collections to our current computer devices. Another initiative was a first pilot doctoral research group on the history of exhibiting knowledge in exhibitions. 7 doctoral students from various humanities disciplines, from history, ethnology, cultural anthropology, history of medicine, art history, Scandinavian studies, wrote dissertation on the history of exhibiting and spent 1 year at a museum that corresponded to their research topic. They were funded for 4 years, not only 3 as usually, and had the opportunity to connect their theoretical work with practical expertise gained at the museum. Thereby, they got the opportunity to weave together collection-based competencies with theoretical expertise in order to write a practically informed history of knowledge transfer in museums. Let me summarize the crucial points of our material approach on the background of the current state of research with material culture. The material turn of the last few decades provided a well-established field for interdisciplinary studies and led academics to experiment with material approaches to their work. At the same time, curators and conservators have begun to work more closely with academics to make museum holdings available as sources for cultural studies and for historical research, in order to generate new questions and to enable new narratives and insights into history. At present, the career options in museums, at least in Europe, remain divided between vocational museology and academic research, with only a handful of PhD-level programs giving equal weight to training in curation and scholarship, and then almost exclusively limited to the field of art history. Giving the emphasis on co-creativity and innovative interdisciplinary thinking in both the humanities and the sciences, there is now a need for skilled, theoretically grounded researchers who are proficient in both material and intellectual tools. And this is what we want to promote. And you see here on this last slide a summary giving some thoughts on our approach. So we reverse the thought process in researching in order to experience things first and research facts later, and to use exhibitions as thinking spaces and the process of exhibiting as thinking in space, as an open process with all senses. Our goals are to explore things as manageable sources, to develop questions with things and not about them, and use exhibiting as knowledge communication. And we hope that the results would be new constellations, new questions, new narratives, for the students a greater sensitivity to material culture and its role for the processes of knowledge creation, and for exhibitions to be used as non-discursive examination results. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your very insightful talk. I'm very sure there will be questions on it. Please keep them until the end of this lecture for a Q&A or a discussion at the end. But without further ado, we will move on to our second speaker today, Lenka Vargová from the Comenius University Bratislava, today with the talk on interactive elements in water transport museums. So we are staying a bit in this material culture, but moving a bit into a different direction. We're looking forward to insights about your research. Lenka Vargová works as assistant professor at the Department of Archive Studies and Museology at the Faculty of Arts at Comenius University in Bratislava, where she also earned her PhD degree in museology and cultural heritage. In her research, she focuses mainly on the topics of museum education and interactive elements in museums and galleries, but also on material culture and daily life in the 20th century, primarily the topics of housing and household equipment. So we are very much looking forward to your presentation, Lenka. And without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Let me start the presentation. I hope you can see it fine. Okay, so in my topic or talk today, I would like to focus on my research, focusing on a topic of interactive elements in ship museums. It ties into a grant project that my colleagues and I are working on, focusing on the topic of shipping and the lives of boatmen on Danube in the second half of the 20th century.
We can't see the presentation yet.
Right. Sorry, why not?
Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no, that's fine. I hope that I did it. Okay, once more. You can see it now.
That looks better. Yeah,
okay.
Just
Perfect.
Start the slides. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so now hopefully it will be fine this time. All right, so as I said, I'll be presenting on the topic of interactive elements in water museums. So why this topic today? Well, museums are definitely part of cultural heritage or heritage tourism, which constitutes quite a big part of world economy nowadays. And museums definitely play an important role in drawing visitors to certain locations. So we should also try to make the museums interesting and relevant to visitors. When it comes to museums themselves, one of their main missions has always been education. The only thing that changes about this is the approach to the topic. Nowadays, it is mostly recognized that museums should offer also different ways of accessing information and enabling different learning styles. And one of the ways how we can do that is through interactive elements in museums. As it has been shown that the physical interaction with exhibits allows visitors to reevaluate their theoretical understanding of the topic, and they retain the information better and also have a better experience from their museum visit. So this is the so-called learning by doing style. Moreover, adding various multisensory elements to exhibitions as sound, smells, various touchable exhibits can lead to increased visitor time that you spend in the museum, in the exhibitions, in front of the artifacts, and it also deepens the learning. When we use interactive elements, they should always have an educational element in them. So we should not do them just because people expect it or we want to have fun, but we should always try to impart some message, some information to the visitors. And also these interactives can help us to focus visitors' attention more on the objects in fun and engaging ways, and they help the object to come to life, to make the experience more immersive. So all these different styles of participation can help us make museums more audience-centric institutions. When it comes to the different types of interactive elements, we can divide them based on different criteria. The one most common, let's say, or most easily recognized is based on their form, of how they are made. So the two biggest groups would be mechanical exhibits, so those that are various hands-on elements or workshops, the classical examples, and then the elements that rely on information technology or digital exhibits and new media, like various videos, animations, VR, AR, etc. And of course, we can have hybrid interactives that combine both of these styles. When making or preparing interactives for a museum, it's always good to also combine the different styles, like not be like, okay, so I like this type and I will put it into all of the exhibitions, but it's good to have a variety to make it different from time to time, to not make it, well, repetitive, let's say. For some examples, again, from ship museums or museums focused on water transportation. One example that I like to use is from Cadiz Ark in London, in the UK. It is a ship museum. It's a former trade ship that used to bring goods between Asia or Australia back to England. And they used a huge variety of interactive elements, both mechanical and digital. and not just focused on the children visitor, but also the adult or the older audiences, because we want to play too as well, right? The other example, again, very nice modern museum, the Estonian Maritime Museum in Tallinn, that focuses on the maritime history of the Baltic region. Again, combining various mechanical elements, games, quizzes with new media. So just to give you an idea of what I am talking about. But my main point today will be about the research that I did recently. I put together 2 surveys focusing on the use of interactive elements in ship or water transport museums. One was from the visitor perspective. That one is mostly closed. So I have received 52 responses. So just to give you a brief idea of what people consider to be interactive elements are suitable for this type of museum. And the other one is still open, still ongoing, and that focuses on the topic of museum education and interactives from the museum point of view. So in this one, so far, I have reached out to 40 European ship or water transport museums. And so far, I have received 22 responses. So I still plan to continue with this survey, but for today, at least some preliminary results. As for the first survey from the visitor perspective, here you can see the demographic data. It was conducted via social media, primarily Facebook. Approximately half of the 52 responders were from Slovakia, and then roughly the same amount from the UK, USA, Czech Republic, plus some responses from other, mostly European countries as well. What I was asking people in this survey, so first I wanted to know their opinion on the use of interactive elements. And all of the responses that I received showed that people like to see these interactives in museums, and most of the responders also like to interact with them. Of course, when we are making interactive elements, we don't want to force people to, like, you have to interact with this now, otherwise we won't let you out of the museum. No, we should view them as something extra, some bonus material that you can interact with if you want, but it's nice to see it there, even if you do not want to play in this regard. I was also asking about their experience with ship or water transport museums, and it shows that 20 responders out of the 52 have not visited any such museums. As for the most visited museums, most often mentioned ones were from the UK, then the US, and Sweden and Estonia also had more than one mention. Then I had an open-ended question asking about favorite types of interactives. So when I put them into different groups, it shows that the most favorite ones are various games, quizzes, tactile elements, and also immersive elements like VR, AR. Also various touch screens, video, audio content, demonstrations, and interactives using other senses than just sight as well. Then I moved on to the topic of interactives that are suitable, in people's opinion, for ship and water transport museums. So here you can see what options were chosen as the most suitable. So the most responses were given to tactile elements, then various games, the use of new technologies, also touch screens, various areas for kids, and elements that use other senses. All in all, here you can see some experience from museums, and mostly people commented that they really think that these elements can improve the visitor experience and that they should not be only for the kids. The adults want to interact as well. And people also pointed out the important question of maintenance. So it's no good having ultra-modern interactives that don't function, that break down, or you can't really access them. So it's very important for museums to also pay attention to this topic. Now, if we move on briefly to the second survey, the still ongoing one, about the museum approach to this topic. So out of the 22 responses, I received most from the museums in UK, then Germany, Hungary, Sweden, and one response from the other museums. When I was asking about the topic of museum education, only one museum responded that they do not have a museum educator yet, but they are planning to add the department. All of the museums use interactives, and most also offer various education programs and have designated space for them. I asked some other questions relating to museum education and the building, but the two most relevant for this talk are the questions about the types of interactives that they use. This time I divided them into physical and digital interactives. So when it comes to physical interactives, the most used were various hands-on and tactile elements, followed by various lift-up panels, sliders, games and quizzes, play areas for kids and worksheets, and also some mechanical elements. When it comes to the digital interactives, then almost all museums use various videos and animations, closely followed by touchscreens and interactive kiosks. Many museums also use audio content in exhibitions, though the actual audio guides have only roughly half of the museums who responded. Another quite well-used category were QR codes and various games and quizzes. So if we do a slight comparison between the interactives that are most used by museums in reality and those that the people designate as the most fitting for this type of museums, we can see quite a bit of an overlap. So various tactile elements, games, interactives, touchscreens, videos scored quite high in both surveys. The biggest differences we can see in the question of virtual reality, augmented reality, and the use of new media. It was scored quite high in the visitors' perspective survey, with 33 people responding that yes, this they would like to see in the museums. But as we could see in the previous slide, only 6-7 museums actually use them in their exhibitions, and that's due to the cost, the maintenance cost, and also that they tend to break down. Sometimes the visitors don't really use them as intended, so museums sometimes, even if they had them, they sometimes take them down. Another difference we can see in the use of worksheets. So these are among the more used elements by the museums, while in the visitor perspective, they were only 10 people who said that they would like to see this time in museums. I think it might stem from the fact that most of the responders were adults, while usually worksheets focus on the younger population, so maybe people just have not been exposed to them that much. And the last big difference that we can see in here is the approach to various reenactions and interactive tours. Though if we look at it from the percent point of view, then 25 people said that they consider this to be fitting for the museums, while only about 11 museums said that they use it. So that's roughly 50% of both responders. So actually, we can see that in reality, the approach is quite similar. To sum up, my goals with these two surveys were to find interesting examples of museum interactives and to see the approach of museums to this topic and how it overlaps with people's expectations, because oftentimes we know that what we expect and what the other side expects does not overlap that much. So this might be a starting point for some further discussion. Okay, so these are my sources for the first section of the presentation, and thank you for your attention. That's it for me today.
Thank you very much, Lenka, for your very insightful presentation. And I think we can open the floor to questions or to a discussion, depending on how proactive our viewers are today. But I'll also use this opportunity to thank you both for providing, this very different perspectives on museums. And before I see any questions in the chat, there was this point you mentioned several times about the physical interaction in museums, and I was wondering, why are tactile elements in museums so popular? Because when you think about classic, the classic idea of museums, you just walk around, you're not allowed to approach the walls where the pictures are hanging, so you have to be really careful about the space between the viewer and the painter and the painting and the sculptures. So this is how this used to be. So I was really surprised to see that tactile elements are very popular in museums. Would you like to elaborate on that more? I mean, both of you. What are your ideas about this development of museum as a space itself?
Yes, thank you for this. So it's true that usually when we go to museum, it's like look, don't touch. But the warnings kind of are there because like everyone wants to touch, because I think like all of us want to say that, oh, I touched the history or something like that. So people have this need in a way to interact with the object. And of course, we can't let them interact with the actual original artifact because it might damage them. But there are various studies when it comes to learning styles that it shows that if you engage various senses, not just like one sense, but you also learn more about the objects by touching it, finding out the textures and surfaces and everything, then you have a deeper memory or learning experience from that, and you remember it more and better. Also maybe because like you have a unique kind of experience in this regard, and also it helps us to somehow make more connections when it comes to the objects, because we are getting to know it in different regards as well.
And I think it has also to do with the digital revolution, because we spend so much time sitting in front of screens, discussing via Zoom. That's why we also see that students would like to study more object-based and more close to handling things. And yeah, it's interesting that you showed us that you have already you can show us statistics that prove exactly this development, which I know only from inside university, where just students are calling for this kind of seminars and teaching, where they can interact more and learn from that for their from their experience. So I think it has to do with this digitization of everyday life.
Yes, I think the digitization really moved this, let's say, I don't know, music movement or changes in a way, because thanks to the huge amounts of digitized collections that we can access online nowadays, people found out like what amazing things we can actually see in many museums. And of course, it's great that you have access online to something that you can't really see in real life, but it's still different if you see the famous painting or sculptures or objects in real life, that you have the experience of, okay, I was there and I saw it, than just viewing it on the screen. And one more step further is this, like touching the history, touching that piece that really interested me. So I think that's something that can really help people to make more connections, to visit museums as well and interact with them in different ways than previously. I also really liked your study program that you presented to us, because here we have the museum study program that I'm part of as well, but we do not have, our university does not have a university museum. So we don't really have the collections that we can give to our students in this way to access and to work with, even though we try to at least arrange for them practice in various museums here in Bratislava that we have agreements with. So they do have this direct experience, but probably to a lesser extent than your students. So I think that's definitely a interesting thing, and how we can draw students to this topic. So we also do like theoretical lectures, like something from the museum studies as well, if you are combining these topics.
Yes, we try to combine it. The clue is that with this, it's like it's not a new study field like museology or material culture as its own like discipline. But if you study history, you can have this as a special field. You can specialize in material history. If you study philosophy, you can kind of specialize. And then they bring their own theoretical background with them and go to the collections with us and then try to connect both knowledge spheres. And we try to introduce also theoretical positions from museology to make these objects in the collections understandable. But then, like, the new opportunity for the students is to then introduce that into their discipline. So they don't have to leave their discipline. They can just like change their thinking in history, thinking in philosophy, thinking in philology, with sources from academic collections or other museum collections. Yeah, so that's the idea, to kind of write history, philosophy, and philology a bit different than we do it with text only.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea and approach, really combining this theory and practice. So I hope that it really works well for you. But
yeah, it's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, definitely.
We find new things in collections which we haven't paid attention yet, so that's great too.
Exactly, and object artifacts are definitely an important source of information, and sometimes we can even discover new information about something that we thought we knew from, all sides. So
yeah.
Really great.
But we don't have the study field museology. We have curating in art history in Göttingen. And yeah, it would be great to connect to museologists a bit more. We work on that. So thanks for pointing me to your study area and that you also go to collections with museologists. It's interesting. And in a way, your talk was like, it fits to each other. I've been just speaking about this learning by materiality, learning by doing, approaching materials, object handling for students, and then transferring this to museum visitors in our university museum. And you explained the same process from the other perspective, like learning by doing for museum visitors. And it's as if we have the same interests coming together from two sides in the museum. That's great.
Yeah, so museums are definitely still a learning institution, for learning. So that's their what's the name? Lifelong learning process as well. So museums and universities have quite close to one another in this regard. So I think there is quite a lot of overlap that we could find in regards to education.
And are you in museology? Are you teaching also in museology?
Yes, so that's my study program, so museology and cultural heritage. The current program that we have nowadays is combined with archival studies.
And are you also realizing interactive applications for museums with students already?
Since we don't have a museum as part of the university, we can't really do exhibitions on such large extent. But one of my colleagues also works for the Transport Museum here in Bratislava. So when he does courses on music exhibition with students, they usually prepare at least some panel exhibition for the museum. So we try to give them space for this practical side of things as well. And I teach also several courses on the topic of museum education and interactive elements, in which I ask students to come up with some ideas for interactives in museums or to put forward some ideas for museum education programs as well. So at least this practical level is there.
Yeah, interesting.
Plus we send them into museums for their practicum, you could say, so they should have some approach. just that we don't have the premises here at the university, sadly.
Mm. You can find other universities. Don't you have any university museum kind of close?
In Slovakia, no. I don't think we have, like, yes, our university does have some collections, but they are not publicly accessible as a form of museum. But we are quite close to Vienna, and I'm pretty sure that they might have some university museum. And of course, Bratislava has quite a lot of museums as well, so we try to cooperate with them when it's possible.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. We don't have university museums at many places. I mean, just a few, and it's just a start because actually the collections are immense and great. So you can tell a lot of stories with that material. And by now, we mostly know only the texts. So it's really fun and eye-opening to see the stuff and to bring it into public and see the reactions, because people get a different picture of science and of knowledge.
Yes, definitely just different, just reading about something and then seeing it with your own eyes, how it works. So that's why all these reconstructions and reenactions are quite popular, not just in museums, but heritage sites and locations as well. And we can also then apply it to study programs at universities or the work that museums do.
Yeah. So it seems we've learned a lot from museology.
There are some intersections, definitely.
Yeah.
Would you say that this is kind of the trend you foresee or you wish for, that this evolution of museums and evolution of museology as, a study field would become something more open, where the public is engaged more with, this exclusive space of, studying?
I think that yes, definitely from the museum perspective of the last, let's say, 20 years, we have seen quite a change in of this museum trend in a way. Like before that, museums were often focused inwards, let's say more on the collections and inner workings and inner research. And nowadays we see more of these opening up to the public and focusing more on the outreach and cooperation and various projects like this. So really we see a huge trend and rise in museum education from the turn of the 21st century. So nowadays it's considered basically a must-have kind of for most museums, and we can find museum education departments or people focusing on this topic even in smaller museums. So definitely from this regard, I think it is an ongoing trend that will just get stronger. Because museums are also trying to reflect various current events and issues and trying to show to people that they are relevant spaces, even nowadays in the digital era and everything.
I'm not thinking that much about how to reach the public, but I'm thinking more about how to reach my academic colleagues. And that's something I would wish for, that museum collections, that collections in general, material that have been collected by academics, but also by everyday people, would be used more all over the field, just like texts in libraries. Museums, for me, would have to become like libraries. I go there and I can find out easily what's there and how to work with, how to access it, have a look, maybe handle things. Museums should have object laboratories to make more research possible, to keep these things alive. I mean, these depots, there are endless, especially in natural history museums. And I'm so sorry for all the stuff which is not being used, just kept. And that's why I think, that's something I would wish for, because I think there's still much to find out and also much to make actual. It's all historical stuff, but we don't know what it was and what we can do with it. So we can kind of bring it back into some kind of life for historians or cultural anthropologists or ethnologists. not only to tell more stories, but also to have more knowledge.
Yes, I definitely agree with you that museums or museum collections and the artifacts that we have are just different type of historical source that we should use to not just do the typical text, but also focus on the material evidence, because we can find a lot of information based on that. And of course, museums do some research, but it's probably not that well known or widespread among the greater population, or sometimes even across the academic population. Because yes, museums and their collections, we can really liken them to icebergs, because what you see on the display is just the top, and there is a huge repository down below the water that most people don't have access to. And in this regard, we could really help people to find out more information and breathe second life into the artifacts.
That's definitely something to aspire to. And maybe that will give some food for thought to academics, educators, students watching this lecture. And maybe that will also inspire them to connect with both of our speakers. The information about whose research you can also find in the description of this video. I would like to, again, use this opportunity to thank both of you for your contributions to the ENLIGHT Lecture Series. Very inspiring, and it's definitely a fascinating subject and can be taken into so many various directions. I think we can now proceed to a more closed networking event on Zoom. A networking session for our researchers, for everyone who signed up, where you can also continue this discussion, ask more questions, and have this more of a closed space for discussing potential collaborations and networking opportunities within ENLIGHT. So thank you very much for your contributions, and we'll see each other in a bit on Zoom.
Thank you for this opportunity as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And goodbye.
Bye.